There's nothing about the FBI that they're privy to. The FBI had a separate investigation that they did not share with them.
Like you, be strong to hold the powers of the sun.
I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Listen to Pavarotti.
Can I be your superhero?
Hello, welcome to The Revealing. I'm your host Pavarotti, and I'm here to discuss the Idaho 4 case. And in this episode, we're going to continue to shed a light on a dark situation. And I want to start off by saying I certainly appreciate all the people out there that are looking into this, all the eyes that are on this case that do see that things aren't right, and all the other creators out there that are diving in and doing their best to make sense of a situation that's very hard to make sense of. In an effort to try to contribute all I can contribute to this case, to try to find the truth and try to help people, if I can, to focus in the right direction, I want to make sure that there are several things that I cover in this video that keeps the focus where the focus should be. And one of those things is, like I'll say, until I find anything that proves it otherwise, is that the body cam footage of the Banfield stop and the stop at the Identity Apartments has absolutely, in my humble opinion, been manipulated. However, I said from the first time that I've brought this information that it would be hard for people to get their mind around, and especially hard for the people that put so much time and effort into this thing when it first started and firmly believe that the crime happened before 4 a.m. or more to the point at 3 a.m. or even before that. I knew those people's heads would explode because they've been stuck on that for almost 3 years. But here's the thing. If you can't get your mind around that, you can talk about it until the cows come home. It has been talked about, and the cows came home. Koberger sitting in a prison cell. So diving into information and trying to continue to point out things that just frankly are not likely based on all the other evidence that we see around this case is not going to help any situation. And here's why I say that. I'm going to show you in this video how I methodically went through to determine what could be altered in the case as far as the video goes. Now, of course, there's several things that they can alter, but there's one thing that's big that they could alter that has not had a verification on it, and that is the timestamps on the body cam footage at the Banfield stop and the Identity Apartments. You must understand that the other cameras, their timestamps have been verified accurate by the FBI. Now, of course, the FBI could manipulate stuff, no doubt. But if we're going to focus in on true facts and true evidence, then we've got to look at the fact that all of the camera footage around the incident has been verified through the FBI to be accurate, but the FBI never verified any accuracy to those body cams. And that's why I focused on the body cam time frame and not everything else around this thing. So when people continue to go back in that circle, I mean, we used to call it, it's kind of like wiping your butt with a hula hoop, right? Sooner or later, you're going to get dirty again. And that's what people are going to continue to do with the 3 a.m. timeline. You're just wiping your butt with a hula hoop. You got to focus in on what's accurate and what the evidence shows, unless we're just having endless conversations about things that'll never get anywhere, because that's what that's going to get us, because that's what it's got us. So I'm going to cover that. I'm also going to cover a very key point as it relates to that, in the fact that, as you heard in the beginning, Steve G say in a private conversation that he probably thought he was having with Ashley Banfield that there were, in fact, 2 investigations going on in this case. Probably more than 2, but you definitely had the MPD, and then you had the FBI independent of the MPD, even though they looked like they were working with each other. I'm going to show you unequivocally where the MPD wasn't being upfront and honest with the FBI at the very least, so you can imagine it probably worked both ways. And that's going to be undeniable by the end of this video, and it relates to the subject matter that we're discussing. And then there's these questions that keep coming up about the green Elantra and how did that factor into this? Well, I'm going to explain that one in this one as well, because it absolutely does. And I know in my video last night, going through my comments, I know a lot of people have pointed out, well, there's a guy running from the house, you know, at 3:30. Well, you got to understand, when you see that footage of the guy running from the house at 3:30, that footage is footage that has been sped up 15 times. Okay, I see the guy come out of the house. When you look at the footage that's not sped up 15 times, the guy just walks out of the house and walks towards Taylor Avenue at 3:30. Could he possibly have something to do with this? I guess it's possible, but he's walking in the wrong direction at the wrong time, so I don't think I would put a lot of attention on him, and that's just my humble opinion. Other people can. Now, there's other things that happen, though, that coincide with things that are very, very likely to be part of this, and I'll touch on that at the end of this and show you where I'm going with it, but we're not going to make that the focus of this video. I do want to focus on the things that I've already discussed. And as always, I've put a lot of time and effort into investigating these things. And I think if you keep an open mind and you pay very, very close attention, because again, I'm going to be detailed, I think you'll agree with me by the end of this with what I'm trying to get across and the points that I'm making. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. Okay, now again, it's this report that you have to become familiar with to look at the evidence that's available to us to continue down this path. And you can see this is stamped with the official record on May 1st, 2023 from the FBI. And this is their official FBI report of the surveillance footage of suspect vehicle. And when you get down here, the following is intended to be a summary of the collected surveillance footage highlighting pertinent sightings which appear to show vehicles matching the description of suspect vehicle or sightings of individuals matching the description of Kohberger on November 13th, 2023. And when it says sightings of individuals matching the description of Kohberger, that is later on in the video footage when you get down to like the grocery store in Washington the next day. But it's this part right here. The below noted camera locations were checked for their time stamp accuracy as compared to actual current time. The following time accuracy was found for each location: 787 Indian Hills, 763, 755. You can see they were all accurate to local time. 1311 South Main Street. This is A&W. That camera was approximately 1 minute and 43 seconds behind local time. 1125 Ridge Road, local time accurate. 1320 Linda Lane. Camera time approximately 5 seconds behind local time. So it's only 5 seconds behind local time, verified by the FBI. 1112 King Road. They verified that camera accurate to local time. 1330 Linda Lane. Camera time accurate to local time. Those are all correct. Paradise Drive, accurate to local time. And then it gets into the Bishop Boulevard and all the Washington stuff from there. So when we're looking at the timestamps on the camera footage from 1330 Linda Lane, 1320 Linda Lane, 1112 King Road, Ridge Road, Main Street, Indian Hills, all of these have been certified as being accurate to local time within 5 seconds or a minute or two. Now, that's important to note, because one thing it doesn't say is they've all been verified not to have things spliced in them or cut out of them. That's one thing that the FBI has not verified. And the other thing they haven't verified is any of the timestamp accuracy on the body cam footage on Banfield or the Identity Apartments. So when I go through this and I look at, based on the actual evidence and conclusions of a report that's an official record by the FBI, and I go, okay, well, if the time's off on one of these or all of these cameras or the Banfield and Identity Apartment body cam, which one could it be? Well, it can't be any of these based on the FBI's report, which only leaves that one. It only leaves the body cams on Banfield and Identity. Now, that's point number one, but we're going to get into this thing a little bit deeper here. And it's this part of the report that I think is the critical part, and it's also the part of the report that the defense team for Brian Kohberger knew was the critical part. And like I've said before, I believe that they knew about the 7 minutes that was off, but I don't believe that they realized that the body cam for the Banfield stop was off an hour and 7 minutes. And here's why I say that, because they were all over this, yet they were missing something, and you could tell that they were. But it's this part of the report, and we need to focus in our attention very closely on this. And it starts at 3:59. I'm sorry, it starts at 3:58. And that's where the vehicle matching the description of vehicle one travels west on Queen Road, turns north onto King Road. Headlights can be seen shining on the trees to the west of the intersection of King Road and Taylor Avenue, indicating the vehicle turned west onto Taylor Avenue. I'll show you exactly what that looks like in the actual footage now, and what it looks like on a map so that everybody's clear what this is describing. And then at 3:59, it's the 1112 King Road footage shows headlights are seen traveling south on Walenta, 3:59:04. So that means when the vehicle comes through 1112 King right here where it's caught coming this way, it turns this way onto Taylor, and then it goes south on Walenta, and you see the headlights in the trees. And it does that at 3:59:04. But then the next stamp is 4 o'clock and 14 seconds. And it says 1112 King Road, headlights are seen traveling north on Walenta behind 119 King Road. So that means they're saying the vehicle comes down here, and within a minute it comes back up and it's caught on the headlights again here. And then it doesn't pull into the King Road neighborhood though, it continues straight. This is right before the Banfield stop. So the vehicle comes around, and then we know what happens then. It has the Banfield stop. And here is what verifies that, y'all, is because 1 minute and 16 seconds later is when a vehicle is captured on camera at 1125 Ridge Road. Vehicle matching the description of vehicle one travels south, then east on Louder. So that means they're saying it comes up Walenta, goes down here on Taylor, and then it goes south and then east on Louder, then turns right onto Ridge Road where it's caught on camera. We know that this right here is not the vehicle that is seen going through the King Road neighborhood. And we know it's not because of two different factors. The first factor is we now know that the vehicle that circles the King Road neighborhood up until 3:56 is the undercover cop car. So that means this vehicle caught on Ridge Road is not the vehicle that made the first 3 loops around the King Road neighborhood. So we know it because it couldn't have come in from this way. But in the same respect, we know it's not the suspect vehicle that comes in at 404 because of the backside. And you can see there's two cameras located at 1125 Ridge Road. They both caught this vehicle just within seconds of each other. But then the FBI report skips to 404 and 20 seconds. And this is how we know on both sides of the equation, this vehicle is not the undercover cop car or the vehicle that comes in at 404, because headlights are seen traveling north on Walenta Drive behind 119 King Road at 404:20, 3 minutes later. And it's impossible for the vehicle to get from here to here without being caught on camera footage. And it's impossible for the vehicle to turn around and go back the other way without being caught on camera footage. And the defense was all over this. So when we look at how this actually looks from the video, let me show you in real time what we're talking about. Okay, so when we look at the new footage that was provided for the 1112 King Road camera, we now see just what the FBI report was actually showing. You'll see right here, 35904, just like they said, you can see the vehicle driving past going south on Walenta. And, you know, that was much clearer than I would have ever expected to see when I was going through and making the animations for the FBI report. I thought it would just show the trees light up, but you can literally see the vehicle driving by clearly behind the residence. And when you go in advance, look, this was real time. See how fast this vehicle turned around and it came back. Here it comes. And you'll see it pass. Here it comes right here, 4 o'clock and 14 seconds. Less than a minute later, the Banfield stop happens. So to see it play out just like we read in the FBI report, and just like we witnessed with our own eyes on the 1112 King Road footage now that's been released, the vehicle pulls out of the King Road neighborhood and it turns west onto Taylor and then goes south on Walenta. Now, as it gets behind the 1119 house, about right here is where you see its headlights and taillights drive by on Walenta. And we also know that the turnaround time on this particular pass was pretty quick. So we can assume he turned around somewhere down here. Now he's coming back up north on Walenta, where we witnessed with our own two eyes him going past behind the 1119 house. And then we know that the vehicle does not turn back into the King Road neighborhood. It continues on past until right here where all of the mystery in the case starts. And I don't believe most people could figure this out at this point, because right here, we now know that the Banfield stop is happening. However, I believe the FBI and the defense, at least the FBI for a certain period of time, did not realize this was happening. Because here's what the FBI report said happened. The FBI claimed the vehicle continued on Taylor and then went south on Louder and then east on Louder, as you see in the animation, and then turned onto Ridge Road, where it's caught on camera here at 1125 Apartments. And then it continued on south all the way down to where Ridge meets Paradise down here. And then instead of going straight on Paradise, it would have had to have gone north back onto Ridge and then continued around this particular loop back up towards the King Road neighborhood. And then as it reaches Walenta right here, The vehicle would have gone north until it is seen again on the Ridge Road camera right here at 4:04, right before it makes the final pass through the King Road neighborhood, such as this at 4:04. That's what the FBI alleged in their report. Let's verify that. Okay, so again, at 4:14 or 4 o'clock and 14 seconds, the headlights are seen traveling north on Walenta like we had seen. 4:01:30, it comes across and it goes south, then east on Louder. So that means south and then east, like we seen in the animation. And then at 4:01:43, a vehicle matching the description turns from eastbound on Louder onto southbound on Ridge. So again, comes across Taylor, south on Louder, east on Louder, south on Ridge, where the Ridge Road apartments capture a vehicle matching the description of vehicle 1. But then from 4:01 to 4:04, there isn't any information about anything. But the only route of travel would have been the route that I just showed you in the animation. And we're back to where headlights are seen traveling north on Walenta Drive behind 1119, right before suspect vehicle makes its final turn into the King Road neighborhood. And just to further verify this, the FBI provided a map. Okay, so this is in the FBI report, and it shows the map depicting what I just showed you in the animation. And they said this loop is 0.2 mile or 0.6 miles, and they approximated at 2 minutes. But again, where they started this was 4 o'clock and 14 seconds. The vehicle seen headlights on the behind 1119 right here, coming across Taylor, south on Louder, east on Louder, south on Ridge, where it's caught on camera here at 1125 Ridge. And then they allege that the vehicle did this. And you can see they've got 3 minutes down here. But here's the thing. And if you notice how the FBI did this, it's almost like a tale of two tales, right? Because you can see they use Google Maps for this, but you can see how it's highlighted in dark blue as it comes out down to right here on Paradise. And you see where they have the Paradise Drive camera that they had been using for the rest of their report highlighted right here. But then it doesn't stay dark blue, then it goes to light blue as it comes back around into the King Road neighborhood. And it's quite apparent that it's done like this with this marker in place because the FBI had to be scratching their heads on how the vehicle came through here and went this way, but this time it was blind to the camera footage on Paradise that had caught the vehicle every other time that it had come through there. And Taylor made note of this, and this is something the defense was screaming from the rooftops for a very long time.
Your Honor, the next part of the affidavit talks about what they have determined to be suspect vehicle number 1. And it trails a path of pieced together cameras. But what they don't tell the magistrate is that the camera near the residence, the 1112 King Road camera near 1122 King Road, you can't tell what kind of car it is. They don't tell the magistrate that that's an impossible car, that their expert can't make an identification off that. They don't tell the magistrate that this is pieced together from various other videos throughout the area. The issue with that's not disclosed to the magistrate is that car appears one time on one video and not any of the others that they try to say are the path. It's not, let me see if I can say this right. It's not following a consistent trail where the one camera that can identify the car where it appears again. It appears one time, and then what law enforcement did was they took several videos from all over the area and said, well, it's the same car and we have an identification. Is that car appears one time on one video, it appears one time.
So we know that the vehicle that they claim did this actually stopped right here and performed the Banfield stop. So it couldn't have been the vehicle that made that loop. And that goes right along with what the defense kept saying over and over in that hearing, that the vehicle that was seen on Ridge Road appeared one time on that one camera. However, a vehicle did come from here, turn south onto Louder, then turn east onto Louder, and then turn south onto Ridge, where it's caught on camera. However, it never completed the loop because it never went past this camera down here. So that means the vehicle that did that is a totally separate vehicle than any of the vehicles that made the passes.
Is that car appears one time on one video. It appears one time.
So then when we go back to the FBI report and we get down to the make and model chart number 3 here, and we see the images of a vehicle that was provided in this report that we're taking on 1125 Ridge Road that we now know was not part of the actual anything in the crime. It's not the undercover law enforcement officer's car because they were stopped at Banfield. It's not suspect vehicle because it never passed Paradise and made its way back to the neighborhood. This car, just like Ann Taylor said, appeared on this video one time and not on any other videos. And then you see the front of the car with the license plate wrapped around the front bumper right here, and the 6 spokes in the wheels. And then the rear photo that clearly shows the actual color of the vehicle, the green, starting to show through. Now we see that this vehicle on one shot at one time is actually the green Elantra. And it's interesting. These 2 photos right here, these are photos that they were working with up until right before the grand jury indictment when they actually completed the 1112 video footage actually being a video. These are the screenshots likely that Mowry took off of the resident at 1112's actual phone of the video footage in the beginning that I showed y'all in the 1112 video saga. That's why these have been attached, and that's why they couldn't identify anything for a long time, because they were likely working off of these. But in the end, this vehicle is completely independent, showed on the video one time and one time only, and it is the green Elantra. And here's how it happened. When the Banfield cops get to their stop on Banfield right here, that means a vehicle came south on Linda Lane, turned east onto Taylor, south onto Louder, then east onto Louder, south onto Ridge, where it was caught on camera by the Ridge Road camera, and then it likely either went here or over here and parked for the evening because it never came back out based on the camera footage. Now, the only other possibility I looked into that would work would be coming down west on Taylor, then turning south on Louder. However, I got with Mark B, and Mark B told me that when he was there, it was almost impossible to make that left off of Taylor onto Louder South. So that means it's the Linda Lane likely direction that he came from. And since the camera footage is missing from Linda Lane during that time, we can also figure out that that's probably another reason why that camera footage is missing. But that's why Ann Taylor kept saying over and over,
Is that car appears one time on one video. It appears one time.
so yes, the lime green Elantra is very relevant to the case, but just because of the identification from the Ridge Road camera. And the reason I'm going through that is because it gets critical right here. You see, in the FBI's report, they list details of examination. The dates of this examination, meaning all the videos and identification of the cars, this examination's dates were November the 19th, 2022 through March 21st, 2023. Key date, November 19th, 2022. And it tells us about the videos and when they got them and when they viewed them. These submitted videos on November 19th, 2022 and November 21st, 2022 were reviewed to determine the questioned vehicle's make, model, and year. Due to insufficient image detail and obscured views produced by the blooming of the vehicle's headlights, the make, model, and year could not be determined. Now, we know now for a fact, because of the police reports, that the videos that he's talking about are of 1112 King Road on the 19th. Remember the saga? Mowry. The 13th, he was informed of possible surveillance footage at 1112 King. He had Corporal Snyder go and get the SD card, and he got the username and password from the user, gave the SD card to Mowry, and Snyder said he could see a screen capture from her phone, and the card was returned to her to enable her to assist in the acquisition of the data. Then on the 17th, he requested Rosinski to recontact her and go by and get it. Then on the 18th, he again attempted to view the contents of the SD card but couldn't. And then finally on November 19th, while reviewing the videos located at 3056 and 420, it appeared the vehicle left the area, may have traveled on Walenta. This is the date that he actually got that footage over to the FBI on November 19th. So, November 19th, we know for a fact they're viewing 1112 and they cannot make an identification. So, the submitted videos on November 23rd, 2022 were reviewed to determine the questioned vehicle's make, model, and year. The questioned vehicle shares similar class characteristics with a fifth generation Hyundai Elantra between 11 and 13. Now, the similar class characteristics include, but are not limited to, the overall body shape, window configuration, side trim, headlight shape, front grille configuration, and rear license plate position. On November 26, 2022, after reviewing expanded known information to include the rear bumper reflector and the shape of the fog lights, the Hyundai and Elantra, the questioned vehicle's year, was expanded to the fifth generation between 11 and 16. Now, we know this is actually not true. This is the only part that they fibbed on in this report right here, was this last part about November 26. And we know that because of the order on Franks that disclosed all this to us in detail. And I covered this with you. And it says, defendant challenges Exhibit A on the grounds that the FBI specialist's identification of suspect vehicle 1 as an 11 to 16 Elantra was based on footage from Ridge Road. The law enforcement knew or should have known. Now, she didn't say the FBI knew or should have known. She said law enforcement. That might be critical here, and I'll show you why in a minute. That was not suspect vehicle 1. That it was not suspect vehicle 1. Not that it wasn't Brian Koberger's car, that wasn't even suspect vehicle 1. Defendant states he knows law enforcement based its identification on the Ridge Road footage. And in the FBI report, we now know they based their identification on the Ridge Road footage because we have emails from the FBI specialist that explain, and here's the key, on November 23rd, 2022, their team mainly looking at the window configuration, something these other images do not. But later that day, an FBI agent sends them images from this video calling it a great one. Now, what were they actually looking at on November 23rd to determine the make and model of the vehicle by the window configuration Jeff H? And then later that day, they get an image that they say is a great one. And let me show you. On the 23rd, they got the Ridge Road footage. They're looking at it, and they figure it's an 11 to 13. Then on the 26th, they expand the footage to 11 to 16, and then they fix it real quick, which we'll talk about here in a second. But what they got initially was this footage right here, because they were talking about mainly looking at the window configuration. That told them that it was an Elantra. They estimated between 11 and 13, because later that day they got this footage right here of the rear of the vehicle. And the rear of the vehicle looks more like an 11 to 13 because these reflectors aren't reflecting to them. And there was no way for them to determine this was a 14 to 16 based on that, but they could determine it was an Elantra based on that. So this was the one they were looking at window configuration. This one, they were looking at the rear of the vehicle, and they were able to determine it was an 11 to 13 likely, but they didn't like the way that the 14 to 16 rear configurations looked. We learned that later in the Frank's order. And right here where it says what the email chain shows is that on November 26, 2022, Agent Imel directed the FBI to open up their search for 11 to 16. And he did it and stated he wanted a better shot of the vehicle's front fog lights and rear reflectors, because they couldn't be identified in those pictures I just showed you. And he said, rather not leave anything out, better be safe than sorry. But then again, 5 minutes later, he sent another email stating, yeah, I see the change in 14. I'm not really a fan of the 14, much prefer 11 to 13, but wanted to lay that out. So because he could not see these rear reflectors, and in the front, you could not determine the fog lamps because of the grainy footage, he preferred the look of this vehicle to an 11 to 13. Little did he know, he was actually right. It was a 2015 and it was green. You just couldn't see the rear reflectors lighting up. But that was the FBI being cautious because they couldn't see the rear reflectors lighting up. Why do I go through all this? I know I've done it before. I go through all this to make this point right here. I just verified to you that it was November the 23rd, 2022, that they got the Ridge Road video footage that they made the determination of suspect vehicle. That was the date the FBI looked at it and said, this is a Hyundai Elantra, November 23rd, 2022. There's one step, or one piece of proof. Second validation right here, who explains on November 23rd that their team is looking at the window configuration, but later that day, they got a great one and said it was a Hyundai Elantra. They claimed 11 to 16. They didn't actually do that until the 26th and took it back 5 minutes later. But November 23rd, FBI determined it was a Hyundai Elantra from the Ridge Road footage on November 23rd. Now, did the FBI tell MPD that they were looking for a Hyundai Elantra? You can bet they did, because of the way that they're having these conversations. That is the FBI telling the MPD on the 23rd that they have an identification and it is a Hyundai Elantra. So why did this happen? Brett Payne, on November 24th, 2022, the next day after the FBI told Brett Payne, we have identified this vehicle as a Hyundai Elantra. Well, Brett Payne knew they had 1112 and they had Ridge Road, and then later on they're going to obtain Paradise. He knew they couldn't see it from Sunset and Indian Hills, so what did he do? He focused on 1112 and Paradise. So Brett Payne went, uh-oh, I know this is the undercover cop car, but let me just check and see. And I'm not going to tell the FBI, because the FBI wouldn't have even known this. So he took the MPD school car, the silver Ford Fusion, and drove the route of suspect vehicle, drove two separate routes in front of the camera located at Ridge Road. Once westbound on Louder and then twice on Ridge Road, southbound and northbound. And he advised the command post of the times these runs and requested video from the point of contact of Ridge Road in order to compare the color of the test vehicle to that of the suspect vehicle. So why would he take the silver undercover Ford Fusion and start running it past the Ridge Road camera on November 24, 2022, when the FBI told him on the 23rd it was an Elantra? This wouldn't be necessary at all, would it? Unless Brett Payne didn't believe the FBI that it was the Elantra and he was thinking it could be that cop car, and he was doing this independently of them knowing it. And why would he do that?
There's nothing about the FBI that they're privy to. The FBI had a separate investigation that they did not share with them.
Well, little did the FBI know the MPD had a separate investigation they didn't share with them either, at least at that point, and that was that suspect vehicle was their undercover cop car, and the Banfield stop needed to be manipulated. There you go. So in the end, here's my point. The FBI never identified the vehicle in the King Road neighborhood from that footage as a Hyundai Elantra. They identified the vehicle as a Hyundai Elantra from the Ridge Road footage, and it is now proven, verified from two different directions that not only was that vehicle not suspect vehicle one, but it had absolutely nothing to do with anything, as the defense said. It just appeared in a video at one time only at that point. Now, it's, in my opinion, about 99% likely that that is that green Elantra, but regardless if it is or not, it's certainly not the vehicle in the neighborhood. So if they're identifying an Elantra based off of a vehicle that was never even in the neighborhood, and we have put a guy in prison for the rest of his life, and that being a major piece of evidence to base that on, and we now know with most certainty that at least 3 passes of the vehicle in the neighborhood was a undercover police car, then how can we literally move forward with this and go through with this? I mean, it's mind-boggling to me how people out there say, well, I think Kohlberger did it. I feel like Kohlberger did it. They're putting a guy in prison based on the way they think and they feel, when the major evidence in the case doesn't even come close to confirming anything. Literally, the only piece of evidence in the case is the DNA on the sheath, and I have showed you over and over examples of breaks in the chain of custody on that DNA, not to mention the other 1,000 arguments around it. But my point to this was MPD knew it. The FBI, based on the wrong video footage, gave MPD the vehicle identification on November 23rd, yet still the very next day, Payne takes the undercover cop car, goes by that same camera footage, takes video of it, gets the video back because he's trying in his mind to see if that might be his undercover cop car, and he is not letting the FBI know that because he knew the undercover cop car, based on the officer's statements, were making those passes through the King Road neighborhood. And remember, that happened one day after he got the statement from Molly that all but confirmed that the car driving through the neighborhood was the undercover cop car. He then took that car and put it underneath the lights at Queen Road to see if it made it tan, and said it did. But I've got something coming to you. Now, when I go through these videos and I do these detailed breakdowns, I'm doing them from just the perspective of the point I'm trying to make in the video. That does not mean that I believe that the DoorDash driver's entire experience there in that neighborhood was without suspicion. I simply believe that some of the statements that she made corroborated the evidence that we looked at, and it corroborates that the undercover officers were driving through that neighborhood. I believe that the things that she left out are the things that are suspect. And that's why I went through the video yesterday to show you that it wasn't the sport utility that was pulling out that Molly was describing to the officers. Now, I happen to have suspicion. I verified everything else based on evidence, but I happen to have suspicion that Molly would not have described that sport utility to the officers, even if she had seen it, because I think it's quite possible that Molly knew who was driving the car that drove out, the little sport utility, light colored, that drove out. I think it's quite possible she knew that person that was driving that car, and it's quite possible that she knew Gun Rack Guy. And no, Gun Rack Guy is not Jack Showalter. Gun Rack Guy does not come out of an apartment. Gun Rack Guy gets out of a car in Linda Lane, racks his gun, heads towards the residence at a certain time. It just happens to coincide with the time that sport utility goes to driving off. And it just happens to coincide when Molly is at the end of her walk there on Queen Road, almost to the King Road intersection, where she's staring away from where the house would be to deliver a DoorDash order. And she's on her phone at a certain time. Well, if you really dive in and you look at it, now you could possibly say Dylan creating a contact at that time had something to do with it, but creating a contact is different. If we had more information around that contact, then we would have more information. But one thing is for certain, it's almost exactly synced up to when that sport utility drives out of there and when Gun Rack Guy is heard on his phone about to walk towards the King Road residence when Molly gets to the end of that street and looks at her phone and does something. I've got a lot I'll be bringing to you on that, but I just wanted to throw that in there at the end. But hopefully that clears up some of these questions, like the times on the clocks. It's verified by the FBI report. The only thing that's not verified by the FBI report is that Banfield body cam time. Now, the green Elantra, people have had questions about. Hopefully I've answered that. I think it's 99% certainty that the green Elantra is what was caught on camera on Ridge Road. Regardless if it is or not, though, that vehicle had nothing to do with the crime, even if it wasn't the green Elantra. That was just a car. And then the other point that I wanted to make sure that I clarified and answered, the fact that the FBI and MPD kept a lot of their investigations independent of each other. So there's certain documents that you look at in this where MPD probably didn't let the FBI in on it, but there's certain documents that you look at in this on the FBI's investigation where they did let the MPD in on some things, and I'll be bringing that to you as well. Oh, wait, let me leave you with a Delta BAM. Did you see that? Watch the headlights, and then you see probably either the headlight or the tail light reflecting in the glass, and then it just kind of fades out. So that means a car parked right there at 4:20 and 4 seconds. Subtract 1 hour, 7 minutes, and 26 seconds, and that means the time on the Banfield body cam it happened was 3:12 and 38 seconds. So within 10 or 15 seconds before that, we would expect to see a car drive past those Banfield cops, wouldn't we?
Staggering around the middle of the roadway, afterwards. So, not saying you're a bad person or anything, but there's a staggering around the middle of the roadway, afterwards. So, not saying you're a bad person or anything, but there's a way to do it, obviously.
Please like and subscribe to the channel. Post your comments, your thoughts, your criticisms. And until next time, Pavarotti is out.
Oh, gonna give it a shot. Only one of me to shield you all from the